Today is Tuesday, January 5th. Yesterday we were celebrating Christmas. Today we're already at January 5th. The days keep on rolling, baby. And this is a post-market review for the stock market activities today. And again, we have seen the opposite picture of what happened yesterday. Yesterday it was sell everything kind of day with very few exceptions. Today it was buy everything with very few exceptions, signaling that the market is still not sure what to make here. Yesterday, they were freaking out about the vaccine deliveries and the Georgia election, which is taking place as I'm speaking right now. Today, we had some notes from Wall Street. Now remember, this is the election that they've been hyping since last year over and over again. That is very important, very critical for the market. When they saw the action of the stock market yesterday, they decided that they want their cake and eat it too. What do I mean by that? We saw notes coming up in the morning from Wall Street firms pretty much saying, heads I win, tails I win too. And here it is. Goldman Sachs predicts another $600 billion stimulus if Democrats win in Georgia. Furthermore, here is from Barclays. The option market indicates that investors are not particularly worried about the Georgia outcome. We tend to agree, as in our opinion, even if the Democrats were to secure both seats, policy gridlock will be the most probable outcome over the next few years. Wait a minute here. What kind of hash are you guys smoking over there in Barclays? What kind of drugs have you snorted before issuing the statement? If the Democrats win both seats, they will have supermajority in the government, meaning there isn't going to be a gridlock because they can pass anything via their majority. But this is Wall Street. They want their cake and they want to eat it too. Democrats win, Wall Street win. Republicans win, Wall Street win as well. This is what they're trying to convey to you. In the market voted today, thinking that what is the worst outcome here? Even if the Democrats win Georgia, we're still going to have gridlock because, here it is, are you ready for it? Manchin optimism. And no, I'm not talking about a fancy house. I'm talking about U.S. Senator from West Virginia, Joe Manchin. Wall Streeters will tell you that even if Democrats win the Georgia elections, don't worry about it, put your blindfold on and continue to buy because Joe Manchin, who is a conservative Democrat, will somehow be the key to the gridlock. Anyways, this was the market sentiment before we even started the day. They were trying to pump and rescue the market. So let's see how well they did. And here we go. The Dow Industrial Average closing in the green by 167.71 points, or a gain of 0.55%. The Nasdaq, the winner of the day, closing up by 120.51 points, or a gain of 0.95%. The S&P 500 also in the green by 26.21 points, or a gain of 0.71%. What about the sector's performances for the day? Right away, we see the inflationary trade taking place once again. Energy finishing up number 1 and winning the gold medal. At number 2, winning the silver medal, basic materials, and for the bronze in third place, consumer cyclicals. All sectors managed to close in the green. However, the laggards of the day, utilities, consumer defensives, and financials. Moving on to the futures market performance for the day. And it was an eventful day in the futures market today due to the decline of the United States dollar, and it will be even more eventful tomorrow if we see the Democrats capturing both seats in Georgia and we see the US dollar declining further. The story of the day came from crude oil, and you see crude up significantly for the day, over 4% with WTI and almost 5% for the Brent crude. And the reason is we've been having the OPEC meeting going on, but today was a surprise day because the Saudi oil minister unleashed a surprise production cuts by the tune of over 1 million barrels a day. And here it is. OPEC Plus delegates tell me the press conference was the first they heard Saudi Energy Minister Prince Abdulaziz announce the extra 1 million barrel per day oil cut. The prince hinted in the meeting an extra unilateral cut was coming, but did not say how much. Big surprise to everybody, it seems. And indeed, it caught the market by surprise, and you saw energy stocks blasting higher significantly. And from the Saudi perspective, it's very simple. They did the math. And would you rather sell 10 barrels a day at $40 and make $400 a day, or would you rather sell 8 barrels a day at $50 and make the same $400 a day? The answer is very simple. We'll go with the 8. The reason is they don't want to deplete the resources fast. It's an oil-dependent economy. The Russians, on the other hand, decided to jack up their production by a little over 100,000 barrels per day. But this was in coordination with the Saudis, and everybody seems happy for now. The problem is, and here it is, Saudi oil minister says OPEC Plus must not slacken resolve. What does that mean? It means that now that we have cut 1 million barrels a day from the global supply, enjoy the higher prices. The challenge, however, for OPEC, and it's been the same story for years now, that when a large country like Saudi Arabia decides to cut their production to lift up oil prices, what happens is the smaller country, another OPEC member, does not abide by the agreement, and they fill in the gap in supply by increasing their own production. So let's say the Saudis cut 1 million barrels a day, and then we see Iraq, Angola, and other countries producing more and filling in the gap. That would take down oil prices. This has been the challenge for crude oil prices. Can producer countries agree and sustain the production cuts or not? But back to our coverage of the futures market, let's see what happened elsewhere. Starting with softs, we see weakness here in lumber, continuation of the weakness, matter of fact. Coffee down, and coca, we talked about the squeeze from the coca wars. This situation is calming down. You saw cocoa prices been retreating for over a month now. What is outperforming for the day? OJ, cotton, and sugar acting sweet as it should. What about metals? We have a decline in the US dollar, and that helps metal prices. You see gold closing in the green, yet underperforming other metals. Silver, platinum, copper, palladium, all outperforming gold for the day. Platinum has been on a run, an excellent run, for a while, and you see copper closing up over 2% for the session due to the decline of the US dollar. If we see further decline tomorrow, metal prices will surge significantly. Just take a look at what Freeport-McMoRan stock has been doing the last few days. Impulsive rallies to the upside. I own the stock, I have no complaints whatsoever, but the stock of Freeport-McMoRan is telling you that the US dollar would decline even further from here. Any blow to the narrative of the decline of the US dollar, and you will see metal prices collapsing significantly. Until then, the party goes on in metals. What about meats? The opposite picture of yesterday. We see lean hogs retreating for the day. Meanwhile, live and feeder cattle closing in the green. What about grains? Again, a decline in the US dollar lifts grains prices, and the inflation in food prices goes on. Meanwhile, the Federal Reserve is too blind to notice it. They're encouraging more inflation in the economy, more than we already have. A recipe for disaster. With that being said, we have gains across the board, exception rough rice, but we see big gains here for soy products, corn reaching 6 years highs. When you go to the grocery store, please notice corn prices. Similar story here with oats, the rally goes on, and canola also closing in the green. Moving on to the big casino, the options market. Let's see what happened today. Per usual, Apple, Tesla, and NIO leading the hottest tables in the casino today. Apple with over 1 million contracts. About 73% of those were calls. Tesla number 2 with a little over 900,000 contracts. Over 55% of those were calls. NIO at number 3 with almost 700,000 contracts. Over 74% of those were calls. Moving on to the most active trades in the CBOE. And today we saw very interesting trades here for the VIX, and they are buying the February contract with a strike price of 50, and they're doing it via a dead spread, buying the 50, selling the 55. But again, this is a very interesting trade because they are buying protection significantly higher than where we are trading right now in the VIX. They're betting that the VIX will surge all the way to $50. That is at least for the February contract, which means that they see upside for the VIX here. Granted, this is buying protection from any unforeseen outcome during the Georgia elections tonight. Moving on to some of the unusual activities that took place in the options market today. And here it is. The most notable trade is for Teva Pharmaceutical. And they are buying the $12 calls with expiration date set up for February 19th. Again, this is a very pricey trade, costing the trader over $6 million. Now, here is a very interesting one for Boeing because it looks like a straddle, meaning that they're buying a put and a call for the same strike price, but I interpret it in another way. I see a very large shareholder of Boeing trying to take advantage of options here to capture both the upside but also have the protection in the downside. And what they're doing is buying the 200 calls, expiration date March 19th, and they are paying about $24.50 a piece, bringing the total for this trade to over $58 million. Now pay attention here. At the time this trade took place, Boeing was trading at around $210, meaning that around $10 of the $24.50 they paid for the trade is already in the money, and they are short about $14 or so to make this trade pretty much risk-free. So how do you raise the cash? You could do a debt spread to lower your entry price, or if you are so confident and you are willing to buy more shares of the underlying stock at a certain price, you do it this way instead. They sold the 200 puts, expiration date March 19th, and they collected about $13 a piece from opening this trade, collecting over $31 million and making the total entry price tag for this trade to about $27 million. Now, what is the ideal outcome for this trade? The ideal outcome is for Boeing to continue to rally higher from this point on. The put will expire worthless. Meanwhile, the 200 calls that they bought will continue to appreciate higher and higher. The entry price has been lowered to about $10 a piece. The stock is already trading at 210. Anything that the stock makes over 210 is counted in the profits for this trade. So it is a very, very smart structure. Now, what is the worst case scenario for this trade? If the stock goes back to 200 or below, they will be obligated to sell their Boeing shares at $200 instead and eat the loss of the $10 per option they have entered the trade with. On the other hand, they will also reserve the right to exercise the put options and buy Boeing shares at $200 again, meaning that the trader here is betting the 200 is the floor for Boeing shares and they expect the name to rally higher. Again, options trading is an art. It's not just you go into your Robinhood account, you find a random call option out of the money, you buy it, you're done. No, the big guys and the big holders, they structure their trades in a very creative way. This is one of them. All in all, if the stock price continues to rally from this point on, the entry price for this trade is pretty much at zero because $10 is already in the money, and then they received $13 in credit additionally from selling the puts, making the entry cost all in all, as the current price stands for Boeing, to about $1. Meanwhile, they can capture all the potential of the upside if the stock rallies beyond 210. And if the stock crashes back to 200 and below, they will sell their shares for 200, assuming that they bought it below that price, so they are capturing profits, and the puts that they sold will allow them to buy back those shares at the same price. Very creative structure. And this is the way I interpret it. Of course, there are many other ways as well. Here is another interesting one for FCX Freeport McMoRan. In this case, they're making a bearish bet, buying the 28 puts, expiration date March 19th. And they are paying big bucks here, about $2.55 a piece, bringing the total to over $1.5 million. Again, if the dollar continues to decline, the likelihood is Freeport McMoRan will continue to rally. but this is an excellent way to hedge if you own the shares already, like I do. I always look at these trades for Freeport-McMoRan because I like to protect my shares, and I do it via buying put options. And in this case, this trade is perfect because the stock is trading over $28 already. So let's say you own 100 shares of Freeport-McMoRan. Your all-in-all investment is about $2,800. What if I told you that for less than 10% of your total investment, you can protect your entire shares of Freeport-McMoRan from declining below 28? You spend $255 to protect over $2,500 worth of investment. And this will give you protection for about 3 months or so. It is worth it, and I follow these trades once in a while. And now, moving on to the headlines that shape the day. And right away, we are starting with macro news. And in the morning, we had some very decent news regarding the ISM Manufacturing Index. Yesterday, we got the PMI. Today, we got the ISM, and it is a similar story. Incredibly strong December ISM manufacturing. Headline rose to 60.7 versus 56.7. That was the estimate. And last month's reading was at 57.5. This is the highest reading in more than 2 years. Production and new orders much stronger. New export orders slightly weaker, but still expanding. Here is the catch. Prices paid surged to 77.6 while employment back in expansion mode. And here are the details for the ISM Manufacturing Index in December of 2020. I want you to pay attention to prices because prices have risen the most, over 12.2 percentage point month over month. And you see the characterization there that the direction of prices is increasing and the rate of change is faster than expected, meaning that inflation is already here and creeping faster and stronger than anybody expects. I'm willing, ready, and able to debate any inflation skeptics right now with this information. How do you explain what's going on with the manufacturing index? Good news for the economy, bad news for the stock market because inflation is rising faster than we expect, and it is a matter of time before yields catch up to the inflation and rise higher, forcing the stock market to contract the multiples, specifically for high growth stocks. Banking stocks, on the other hand, specifically regional banks, will benefit tremendously. Are you paying attention or not? Continuing with macro news regarding the auto market. And just like the housing market, it's been in a bubble since the summer due to the FOMO of buying pickup trucks. And here is what we got. While auto sales have declined substantially this year, meaning 2020, consumers are paying a lot more for vehicles, with the average price paid rising to $38,000 in December from $34,000 earlier in the year. What is the take here? Number one, inflation. Car prices are going higher. Number two, it tells you that the majority of the cars sold during the year are not economy cars. It's not people leasing or buying cheap vehicles to go from and back to work. It is pretty much pickup sales, expensive vehicles, which tells you that this is due to the spending from the haves segment in the economy. We also have data from General Motors and other auto manufacturers. We'll cover that tomorrow because we don't have time for that today. For now, we're moving on to Fed news, and let's see what happened today. We have a lot of Federal Reserve President speakers during the week, and today we heard from the Cleveland President, Mr. And here it is. Fed Mr. says policy will stay accommodative for quite some time. What a surprise, breaking news, as if we did not know that ahead of time. But this was the good in terms of Fed speakers today. There is the bad and there is the ugly. So let's go with the bad. Here's the Chicago President Evans. And yesterday, of course, Mr. Evans assured us that the supply of cocaine will continue and might even increase by expanding the balance sheet. And here it is. Financial stability objectives are best addressed through supervision and regulation rather than through monetary policy tools. Let's switch to English. and translate what Mr. Evans just said. He's saying that we have flooded the market with an enormous amount of cocaine, which led to the creation of an asset bubble in the market. But the whole financial stability thing is not our concern. We, the Fed, our job is to supply the economy with more cocaine when we need to. If that creates an asset bubble in some corners in the economy, such as the stock market or the housing market, that is not our job to pay attention to. That is on the lap of regulators, meaning the SEC and other departments, to fix the overinflation in asset prices. In other words, Mr. Evans is saying, don't look at us when this bubble bursts and we see a financial crisis once again. Don't blame us. Blame the SEC. And here is perhaps the most shocking statement from all the Fed presidents that we've heard from so far this week. Here is the Atlanta Fed President Raphael Bostic. And this man was, I say was because maybe he's not anymore, but was at least considered to replace Jerome Powell as the Fed Reserve chairman under Joe Biden's administration. But I don't think that will happen anymore because Mr. Bostic decided to slip and tell the truth for a little bit. And here it is. The Fed could start tapering its bond purchases this year if the pandemic ends and the economy gets the expected boost. Wait a minute here, Mr. Bostic. You're not supposed to say that. The market does not like it when you guys stop the flow of cocaine. We want more cocaine, not less. So stop spoiling the party, Mr. Bostic. And by the way, the Federal Reserve, all in all, keeps saying that we need more financial easing. We need more tools. Remember tool man Jerome Powell? He says we need more tools to ease up and help the economy. Well, here is the Goldman Sachs U.S. Financial Conditions Index. We are already at the easiest financial conditions we have ever had in the history of this country. Meaning that if you're a public corporation or a bank, getting money is the easiest thing ever. If you're an entrepreneur, you need to raise some cash, it is a piece of cake. So what more easing is the Fed looking forward to? This is already very easy. And perhaps let's end with this piece from the Wall Street Journal from Andy Kessler. And I don't think that Andy Kessler will be invited once again to write at the Wall Street Journal because of what he said in this piece. And it is an excellent piece that I highly recommend for you to read. Here's the headline: How the Fed Stifles Lending. Quantitative easing hoovers up bonds, leaving less collateral for eager borrowers. Dear Jerome Powell, end quantitative easing now. The Japanese tried QE in 2001, buying government debt, mortgage securities, and even stocks. It did not work. The Federal Reserve has tried it 4 times since Lehman Brothers went belly up in 2008. Quantitative easing does not work, and instead of keeping markets stable, it creates instability. You hear that, Mr. Chicago Fed President Evans? The Fed supervises and regulates U.S. banks, but traditional banking, think Mr. Potter from It's a Wonderful Life, represents only 15% of all lending, maybe less. The rest is the mysterious sounding shadow banking system based on securities lending and other credit products, including repurchase agreements, aka repo. What does that mean? You think about the Federal Reserve as a central bank of the United States, meaning that it deals with traditional bankers from JP Morgan, etc. But that is only 15% of the repo operation. The vast majority of it happens under the shadows from wealth funds and hedge funds. A lot of funny business happens overnight, and it goes unregulated, totally ignored by the government. Continuing with the piece. In repo, broker-dealers, hedge funds, and banks construct short-term transactions. You put up collateral, treasury bills, or sometimes less pristine instruments with an agreement to buy them back the next day or week for slightly more and invest the proceeds in the interim. Are you surprised or wondering how the overnight manipulation of the stock market happens? They go to the repo market, giving up the collateral, the treasuries they have, they raise the cash, they pump the market overnight, they dump in the morning, they take some of the proceeds, they buy back the treasuries they put up in collateral and keep the profits. It's a rigged scam that's been going on for years and years and years with no watchdog whatsoever. Because remember, the Federal Reserve is supposed to be an independent entity, so they can do whatever the hell they please. Continuing, sometimes lenders repledge the collateral to other lenders and take out repo loans of their own, and the cycle goes on. It's a little bit like a hot potato, passing the collateral to the next guy, known as rehypothecation. These transfers used to be done once or twice for each posted asset, pay attention, but are now sometimes done 6 to 8 times, each time creating new money supply. Note, this is modern money creation outside the purview of the Federal Reserve, and it is huge. Continuing, when times are good, repos work fine. The agreement expires without problems and the collateral gets passed down to the chain smoothly. But eventually, iffy collateral sneaks into the system. That is also fine until the market hit an inevitable rough patch, like say March 2020. No one will take the junky stuff anymore, and everyone scrambles for good collateral. So there is a mad dash, a brawl really, to buy treasuries like musical shares, with 6 to 8 buyers eagerly eyeing one share. Yes, stop buying treasuries. The Fed is depriving the rest of the system the oxygen it needs to grow. And the 6 to 8 times treasury get repledged, which creates that excess money supply. Well, that money has to go somewhere, which explains the hot air pumping up Tesla, DoorDash, Bitcoin, etc. Without quantitative easing hogging collateral, maybe rehypothecation is done 1 or 2 or 3 times, meaning a much more stable credit market. Momentum, investors beware. Sadly, there are obstacles, not at least of which is that Mr. Powell wants to be renominated for Fed chairman. Ending quantitative easing would probably let interest rates return to a higher normal, which would increase cost of running government deficits, and the bubblicious stock market might deflate. So what? Global credit is, Mr. Snyder tells me, a quote-unquote fragile system that doesn't need much of a trigger to go backward. The least the Fed can do is get out of the way and quantitative easing now. Of course, we're not going to hear from this guy ever again. He's probably going to disappear, just like Jack Ma. But the moral of the story is that there is no exit strategy for the Federal Reserve here. They have no clue what they should do to exit all of this program they have unleashed and doubled down on during 2020. Add to that the fact that inflation is going to rise, and the Fed is a very confused organization. On one hand, they want to raise inflation, but they also want the 10-year Treasury yield and beyond to stay low and stable. You can't have both without introducing yield curve control. Furthermore, they want to increase the money supply and they keep it unregulated and unchecked, as the article explained to you. Meanwhile, they also want to keep the US dollar stable and higher. You can't have both. You can't have your cake and eat it too, Federal Reserve. To save the economy, the Federal Reserve will have to do something that they have dreaded to do for years and years, giving a reality check to the stock market, letting inflation rise, and in turn, Treasury yields will rise as well, and the Federal Reserve will have to increase their own interest rates to keep the economy stable from any bubbles. But to keep the economy stable and financial stability, as Mr. Evans is talking about, you need to pop these bubbles before they get any bigger. In conclusion, to save the economy, the Fed must crash the stock market. Otherwise, the bubble will get bigger and bigger and bigger until it pops, and now the COVID crisis gets morphed into a financial crisis, and all of a sudden the Fed looks confused and have absolutely no idea what to do. We have to look for Toolman Jerome to save us again. Moving on to some market sentiment news. And here it is. Insiders continued to shed their equity holdings in December, letting go of over 1.93 billion worth of shares while only buying 102.3 million. Tech saw most sales at 584.1 million, while industrials saw most purchases at 32.8 million. So again, retail traders going all in buying tech stocks, Naruto style. Buy first, think later. Matter of fact, don't think at all. And we have insiders here dumping their shares. Moving on to the stimulus and how it's going to be spent. Spoiler alert, a lot of the $600 stimulus will go into Robinhood accounts to buy call options and stocks. And here's the headline from Bloomberg. Stocks, Bitcoin, and more. Unusual ways Americans are planning to use their 600 quote-unquote stimmy. And here we have Albert Lewis III. Very interesting name, by the way. A 19-year-old Iowa State University student who grew up in Chicago has already decided where the money is going, into his Robinhood investment account. Mr. Lewis says, the 600 is not needed at the moment because I'm a trust fund baby. Otherwise, why the hell would I have Lewis III in my name? But anyways, here he is saying the 600 isn't needed at this moment. I am investing it hopefully to turn it into something more than that by the end of the time I'll need it. 600 in a year isn't going to turn into 10,000, but if I invest it now, in 40 years, it's going to be worth way more. Hey, Albert Lewis III, are you sure you're 19 years old and not 119 years old? What the hell is the matter with you? Talking about 40 years horizon and rational investing, what the hell is wrong with you? This is the Robin Hood's land. This is the La La Land stock market. Yes, you can turn 600 into 10,000. Matter of fact, you can turn it into more than 10,000. I'll show you in the conclusion of the video. The hell is wrong with you, bro? You buy call options in Tesla, QuantumScape, that 600 will turn to 60,000, baby. Welcome to the new video game market. But in all seriousness, here it is when Americans are asked how would they use their second stimulus payment, and this is broken down by income, by the way. Poor people, surprise, surprise, 60% of them say they will pay for basic living expenses like mortgage, rent, and food. Meanwhile, the richest people with income over $100,000, the majority of them are saying we will save it 43%. Now, here's the dumb money part. 7% of poor people and 11% of mid-income and high-income said that they will make discretionary purchases like new TV or PlayStation 5. Did you buy Sony stock yet, or do I have to spell it out for you? And here is more on market sentiment. JP Morgan, aka the Landromat, says Bitcoin could surge to, wake up now, $146,000 in the long term. Of course, JP Morgan, the Landromat, is famous for washing money for drug cartels, mobsters, and even terrorists. And they now see that Bitcoin is an excellent racket for them to join. Remember that the Landromat has been rigging the commodities market, specifically the metals market, and now they're eyeing to rig the crypto market as well. Moving on to the last bit of sentiment news I have for you. Legendary investor Jeremy Grantham predicted the past two financial meltdowns. Now he says these three signals are foreshadowing a crash in another bubble being created by stocks and SPACs. GMO co-founder Jeremy Grantham renewed his grim outlook for U.S. stocks, warning a quote-unquote fully fledged epic bubble just days after equity indexes finished off a euphoric year. Stocks are careening away from fair prices amid quote-unquote hysterically speculative investor behavior, and even the Federal Reserve wouldn't be able to stop a looming crash, Grantham wrote in a letter titled Waiting for the Last Dance on Tuesday. I am doubling down because as prices move further away from trend at accelerating speed with the growing speculative fervor, of course my confidence as a market historian increases that this is indeed the late stage of a bubble. Grantham wrote, a bubble that is beginning to look like a real humdinger. Grantham 82 did not say when or what factors will end the extraordinary run. Nonetheless, he asserted that a reckoning will come and will go down in history with the South Sea bubble, the 1929 crash, and the 2000 tech bubble. But again, what is this amateur knows about stock market investing? Mr. Grantham needs to learn from us, the new generation of investors. We the Robin Hoodians, no more than Jeremy Grantham. We, the Robin Hoodiots, are the new Jeremy Grantham. While you're doing your fear porn, Mr. Grantham, you're missing out on the action. Check out my QuantumScape gains, bro. Oops, wait a minute. What happened here? Moving on to the whole Alibaba Jack Ma saga. And let's start with this piece. The New York Stock Exchange said it no longer plans to delist China's big three telecommunication companies, and right away you saw Chinese stocks surging in the morning. But perhaps this is the most important development. Just a few minutes before the opening bell rang, CNBC anchor David Faber got a call from an anonymous source of his saying that Jack Ma is not missing. He's just been laying low. And here is my question to David Faber and other news organization who parroted and repeated this piece of news as if it is factual. Meanwhile, if me and you did that and said, oh, according to our anonymous source, Jack Ma is not dead and is not missing, is well and alive, you think the news media will repeat what we just said? No, you'll be labeled as fake news by Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, etc. But somehow these anchors on CNBC and other news networks can say, oh, my anonymous source said that Jack Ma is all right, and all of a sudden we take that as a fact. How do we know that it's not a billionaire or a large shark holding Alibaba shares wanting to pump the stock, giving a call to David Faber in the morning just before the opening bell and saying, hey, by the way, David, Jack Ma is a good friend of mine and I know that he's laying low, he's not missing. The intention, of course, is to pump the stock because they're willing to create bag holders in the process of dumping their own bag. And David Faber and CNBC, of course, are participants in this without verification whatsoever. And you saw Alibaba shares rallying significantly during the day. But here's what happened next. Alibaba is shutting down its music streaming app next month, signaling an end to the Chinese tech firm's big music ambitions. That was done via force, by the way, not willingly by Alibaba. Here is more development that happened after the bell. China regulators are demanding that Jack Ma's Ant Group share voluminous consumer data collected by its ubiquitous payment app Alipay, with a credit reporting system run by the central bank, the People's Bank of China. Furthermore, we heard after the bill, here it is, President Trump signed executive order banning transactions with 8 Chinese software applications, including Ant Group's Alipay. Now again, I know a lot of you did not listen to my advice of not buying the dip in Alibaba, and you bought it anyways. Some of you are buying it for a trade, they're buying call options. I understand that, you playing the bounce, etc. But if you're considering Alibaba as an investment for the long term, you're out of your mind, because here it is, the Chinese regulators are saying we need to limit how much growth this company is going to have in the future. Why the hell would you want to invest in something like that? Furthermore, the whole pump that happened in the morning by David Faber should be investigated. We should know who the source is and how reliable the information they have is. But again, it's this wild jungle of a market, pumps and dumps all over the place. SEC is not anywhere to be found. You see pumps in the morning in Reddit, pumps in the morning from TikTok, pumps in the morning from CNBC. Nobody questions anything. And by the way, if you're wondering about the whereabouts of Jack Ma, maybe this is a little teaser here. We talked about the Chinese business person who got poisoned yesterday, and now we have another one. China imposes death sentence on Lai Xiaomin, former chairman of asset manager, whatever the hell that name is, for taking bribes, corruption, and bigamy in one of the nation's biggest financial crime cases. Now, I'm not familiar with the case. This guy, for all intents and purposes, might be a crook and deserve the punishment. But again, they're giving the death penalty for financial crime. Now, if we had this in the United States, maybe we'll have a functioning financial system. But anyhow, it shows you that China is cracking very tough on these billionaires, and they are rethinking how rich and powerful they should let Chinese billionaires become, and at what consequence if they're not loyal to the CCP. Furthermore, allowing companies to grow with no limitations like Alibaba will in turn create powerful billionaire owners like Jack Ma who have the power and the wealth to challenge the CCP. China is rethinking their whole system, and it's a storm you don't want to be involved in. I have more corporate-specific news for you, but we are running out of time, so I'm going to cover them tomorrow instead. For now, we are moving on to the heat map analysis, and let's see what happened today. Right away, you see that the overall picture is green. However, we have pockets of losses here, so let's go through them one by one and try to find any theme for the day. Starting with the technology sector, we see that Apple bouncing back along with Sony massive gains for the day, over 3%. We see chips, software names all bouncing and rebounding from the losses yesterday. However, the laggards of the day, notably from VeriSign down over 3%, Fortinet down over 2.5%. And when we move on to communication services, we see that the big tech names, Google, Facebook, Netflix, they're all muted. Facebook and Google closing in the green, Netflix in the red, but all in all, no significant activities whatsoever here. And the same goes for Disney. Zoom muted, but you see that the Chinese telecom names, specifically CHL China Mobile, closing almost 10% for the session due to the news that the New York Stock Exchange will not delist these companies. But the notable rebounders here are the hottest names, the IPO names, Airbnb up over 6.5%, DoorDash over 3.5%. Moving on to consumer cyclicals, and right away we see that Amazon is outperforming big tech along with Apple, but the notable gainers of the day are the Chinese names Alibaba, JD, Dada, all of these names closing significantly in the green, along with Carvana up over 8% due to the news that I covered of auto sales. They're down, but prices are higher. We see a continuation of the momentum here for Chewy, over 7% gains. All in all, the cyclical sector did incredibly well for the day. When we talk about cruises, hotels, casinos, all the reopening names managed to outperform for the day, along with some retailers, specifically Lulu, but we have seen a pullback for the gainers from yesterday's session, specifically the Chinese EV names. Li Auto down over 4.5%, Xpeng down almost 4%, NIO down a little over half a percentage point. The weakest sector here in cyclicals is residential construction, the home builders. We're talking about DR Horton, Lennar, Toll Brothers, all closing in the red for the session. Moving on to consumer defensives, what do we see here? They're muted, but we saw a very notable options activity for Target buying Marsh calls, and you see Target closing in the green over 1.5 percentage points. A rebound in beer, Budweiser, Ambev, Molson Coors, all closing significantly in the green. And when we move on to REITs, the notable outperformer here is the ticker BEKE, and it is for KE Holdings. The name finished the day up over 7%. Meanwhile, we saw weakness to muted action across the board for REITs, specifically for public storage, the ticker PSA, down over 1% today. Moving on to utilities. Any notable activities here? Not really. Muted action for utilities across the board. Materials. We see the copper rebounding significantly today. Freeport-McMoRan up over 4.5% for the session. Meanwhile, gold miners muted, just like you saw the action for gold futures. Copper outperforming gold. This is not a new story. It's been going on since the summer. What about industrials? Boeing is the notable winner here. Over 4% in the green. General Electric, Emerson, all rebounding from the losses from yesterday. Moving on to the biggest winner of the day. Energy. Exxon up over 4.5%. Chevron remains an underperformer, up only 2.7%. But my favorite name here is British Petroleum, BP, up over 7% for the session. We saw massive gains for the smaller names. Occidental Petroleum up over 10% for the session. Moving on to healthcare. What do we see here? The opposite picture of yesterday. Moderna was outperforming yesterday. Today it is lagging. Moderna down over 2%, but we didn't see notable activities to the upside. You see that CVS holding its gains from yesterday, Walgreens losing half a percentage point. The healthcare plan names retreating just slightly. We're talking about United Health, Anthem, Cigna, etc. Of course, anticipating the results from the Georgia elections tonight. What about financials? Excellent day for Morgan Stanley. Goldman Sachs been outperforming for a while. I have call options for Goldman Sachs, and I intend to exercise them and buy shares for the name. Banks, mixed action here. The weaker banks, Wells Fargo, Citibank, closing above 2.5% for the session. Meanwhile, the bigger banks, JP Morgan, Bank of America, muted. JP Morgan closing in the red. Credit card services, MasterCard down, Visa down. We see American Express outperforming here, closing for the session over 0.5 percentage point, and PayPal rebounding from the losses yesterday, joining the Square party and closing over 1% in the green. Moving on to the rotation trade. What do we see here? Any theme? Not really. It is the tide that lifted all boats, the stay-at-home names, the reopening stocks, all up for the session. We see an outperformance here from names like Zillow, DocuSign, Nvidia. Netflix is the only laggard here. Across the aisle for the reopening names. The laggard from yesterday, Chevron, is the leader today. Meanwhile, we see very slim losses for TJ Maxx, Ulta Beauty, and Coca-Cola. Moving on to the charts analysis, starting with the SPY 15 minutes chart. What do we see here? Rebound day, dead cat bounce day. You're not going to know until you see the action tomorrow. For all we know, we have a bear flag consolidation. But what does that mean, by the way? When you look at bear flag, bull flag, does that mean anything? No, it does not. What it means is we saw a primary move to the downside, and then we saw a reactionary move from dip buyer pushing the index higher. Not as high as where the downward primary move has started, creating the so-called bear flag. And usually what happens is that the primary move persists and we see a continuation of the move to the downside. That, of course, can be negated by very different factors. This is not a technical analysis class, but if you see the secondary reactionary movement on higher volume than the primary move, then the bear flag is dead and you're likely to see that this was just a dip to buy and the market would rally higher. We don't know the answer yet, but we will find out as soon as tomorrow. For now, we can look at the daily chart for the continuous contract for the SPY. Did we do anything different here? Not really. We closed positive, but we are still below the upper limit of the range, consolidating for weeks and weeks now, not doing much at all, just grinding slowly and slowly higher. But we are running out of the momentum here. We're not going to turn bearish on this chart, remember, until we break 3,600. Absent of that, the SPY remains bullish all in all, the big picture. Moving on to the Qs. Similar story here. It is recovery day. The Qs managed to do a little better than the SPY, recapturing the support line of 308.5 and recapturing the trend line in yellow. Is it enough? Not really. The bear flag formation is on for now, suggesting a continuation of the move to the downside until and unless we push higher tomorrow on larger volume. What about a daily chart for the Qs? Do we see anything here? We broken the trend slightly, climbed back today. Is there any significance here? If you look at it one way, there is damage, technical damage to the upward trend. On the other hand, we managed to close and recapture above the trend line. A continuation of the upward move tomorrow will mean a full recovery and a confirmation of the recapturing of the trend in the Qs. Moving on to the IWM 15 minutes chart. And yesterday somebody pointed out to me that there was a bull flag formation at the end of the day for the IWM, and perhaps that played out today. But again, it was a buying program early in the morning that lifted all boats. It wasn't IWM specific. You saw the SPY up, the Qs up, pretty much every index trading higher due to the buying program in the morning. For the bulls, the IWM pretty much erased the majority of the losses from yesterday, and it caught and confirmed the support of 191.5. For the bears, the trend has already been broken. We're talking about the range, and now we're just consolidating the aftershock, and we will continue the move to the downside. Here is a daily chart of the IWM. Can we see anything from here? We see that the upward trend is halted for now. It is broken, and the IWM could do two things: consolidate and then create another upward trend, or consolidate and then flush downward to meet the price from which investors will find it attractive to pick up again. Make no doubt here that we are weakening from a technical perspective. Just take a look at the RSI and see where we are today. But we need to look at the Russell 2000, the big brother of the IWM, the ticker RUT. And let's see what we can see here. The trend clearly has been broken and we are consolidating in a bearish formation that suggests we have more pain to come for the IWM. Now let's take a look at the smaller brother of the IWM, the IJR. And when we look at the IJR, we don't see any damage whatsoever. Matter of fact, today it was a recovery day, recapturing all the losses from yesterday and then some. What does that tell us? It tells us that there are pockets in small caps that are still outperforming and still has the momentum. Perhaps certain pockets, the bigger ones in small caps, are broken, but we need to see the smaller momentum names broken as well in the IJR, and that would be the confirmation that the IWM is ready to break down. So please keep your eyes. If you're trading the IWM, keep your eyes on the RUT and the IJR. A weakness in the IJR will 100% confirm the demise of the IWM. Moving on. Speaking of demise, let's talk about the dollar index, the DXY, closing decisively in the red and breaking the ascending line in the RSI, signaling further weakness. I am watching the elections in Georgia right now, and if the Democrats manage to win, we will have more money supply in the system, meaning more pressure, downward pressure on the US dollar. A Republican win, on the other hand, could force a short squeeze covering rally for the dollar index, and that could lead us higher. This is why this election in Georgia is very critical. Moving on to gold. What do we see here? Gold moving higher today again on the weakness of the US dollar, but not by much. My impression here is gold acting like a mature adult, not wanting to rally ahead of the fact and ahead of knowing the results from the Georgia elections. The fate of gold will be decided by the fate of the US dollar. Dollar goes down, gold goes higher. Dollar goes up, gold goes lower. Moving on to yields, the TNX. What do we see here? Today was a big day for yields, and we are marching slowly but surely to the psychologically important level of 1%. Again, the outcome from the elections tonight will have critical consequences for the movement in the TNX. What about the volatility index, the VIX? We saw a retreat today, but closing above the critical level of 25 and the upward ascending line in the RSI, the MACD is still intact, suggesting that it could be a reload day for the VIX before popping higher tomorrow. Of course, once again, it all depends on the outcome of the Georgia elections. Moving on to Apple. What do we see here? Apple rebounding today, but facing the resistance of 131, capturing it early in the morning, failing, then trying again at the end, and the closing print here came out at 131 and 1 cent. So I don't know, should we give Apple the credit here for closing above the support line with 1 cent? You tell me. Moving on to Tesla. Any new development here? Not really. The rally goes on. I keep getting messages from you guys saying that I shorted Tesla and it keeps going higher. Don't do it to yourself. You're just going to lose money shorting the name right now. I told you the 2 signals to look for. Number 1, 84 reading in the RSI from a daily perspective and breaking the support level of 599. Absent of that, I'm not interested in shorting Tesla whatsoever. And now let's move on to conclude this video with questions and answers. And the first question in summary asks, are you still bullish on Uber? And they cite the upgrade today from a certain bank, a certain analyst firm that called Uber the best stock for 2021. Now, it's not that I'm bullish or bearish on Uber. I've been bullish on the name since the summer because I told you during that time that it is a hybrid play. It is a stay-at-home play, and it is also a reopening play because they have the Uber Eats business, which is compensating for the losses from the rides business. It took a little while for investors to appreciate this outlook for Uber, but now the name is rallying pretty much to all-time highs. When I was looking at Uber's chart a few days ago, I was looking for a trade. I saw the bull flag formation, bought call options. What do you know? The good news is the name popped higher, and those options appreciated by the tune of 100%. The bad news is Yours truly did not close his options and we went down from that point on. However, today we bounced higher and those options are back in the green, baby. What do I do from now? I think that the momentum will continue for Uber here. And I'm not looking to fall in love with the name. I'm looking for a trade. If we reach 55, 56, I'm taking my profits off the table. Now, if you're looking for Uber as a long-term holding, maybe you need to take a look at Lyft instead. Uber is already a $90 billion plus company. Lyft, on the other hand, is just a $15 billion company. It is generating about $3 billion in revenue. In this market, this company is cheaply valued. Furthermore, when we talk about reopening, it is likely to benefit Lyft more than Uber. Lyft has been punished because it doesn't have a food delivery business. But now we're entering a new post-COVID world of the reopening and normalization. That is a tailwind factor for Lyft. In addition, we have broken the descending line of consolidation here since the IPO, and we are creating a new bullish trend technically for Lyft. I would 100% go with Lyft at this stage versus Uber. And here is the last question of the day. Do you still own Live Nation? What is your outlook for the name? I do not own Live Nation anymore. I bought it in the summer and I sold it in November after the gap higher that you see on the chart. The name is already trading at its pre-pandemic level. We get the fact that they are a much leaner company now. They raised a lot of cash and some of their bookings is still intact. They just delayed it from 2020 to 2021. If you're attending a Taylor Swift concert, you're just delayed to 2021. And most customers are not canceling their tickets. Now, if you have a ticket for the Rolling Stones concert, that's a different story. If Mick Jagger dies, you probably want to cancel your tickets. However, I happened to attend a Rolling Stones concert here in San Diego a few years back. And I noticed that they had a fake Mick Jagger doing the concert. Meaning that Mick Jagger did the show for about an hour or so, then he went to sleep and they released his body double to do the show. Of course, the audience is half coked up and the other half is high on ecstasy, so they're not going to realize that it's not the real Mick Jagger. So you might not cancel your Rolling Stones ticket after all, and that is good news for Live Nation. However, the name is going way ahead of itself already. I already took my profits off the table, and my recommendation is if you bought the stock after the COVID drop, take some profits off the table, take your principal out plus 20% or so, and then let the rest ride and buy put options to protect whatever profit threshold you're looking for. For me, it was a trade. It was a vaccine trade. Got in the summer, got out in November, not interested in falling in love with this name. And by the way, before we conclude this video, this is going to be my last video on YouTube. I am retiring, so sadly I have to say farewell here. And if you are curious why I'm retiring and not doing videos in YouTube anymore, the reason is I found a new financial advisor. And I already contacted her on TikTok, and she agreed to manage my portfolio for a 3% management fee, plus $200,000 up front. And now I don't have to worry about my portfolio whatsoever. I don't need to make videos on YouTube. I don't need to do anything because I found the best financial advisor ever to manage my money. Please do not make fun of her because you know that she made more money than you did in 2020.
How to turn your $600 stimmy into $13,000. Stocks to invest in 2021. The first one is Blink, BLNK, the gas station of electric vehicles. Last year, their stock price was just $1.89, and today it sits at $42.75. That's a 2,161% growth. The next one is Square, SQ. Last year, their stock price was $63, and today it stands at $217. That's a 240% growth so far. Lastly, we have Tesla, TSLA. Last year, their stock price, and this is taking into account the stock split, was at $86.05. And today, it stands at $705.67. That's an over 700% return. Investing in any one of these three companies will bring you large returns.